Welcome back, everyone. So we're already in week 4. Time is flying. So last week you submitted your first milestone assignment. So I am busy grading those. And once I finish grading them, I will post an announcement letting you know that I have posted feedback on your assignments. When I do so, please read through the feedback carefully. Now, one thing to note, in the rubric, there's only 3 categories for grading, whereas your final project has 4 categories for grading, or 4 grades possible for each category. There's an exemplary category in the final project, whereas in your Module 1, there is only a proficient category was the highest. So in order to reach that exemplary category, you'll need to include even more detail and research in your responses. So read my feedback carefully, and I do provide pretty extensive feedback in your paper. So you can expand upon your ideas that you included to get that exemplary status in your final paper. Okay, so do take that into consideration as you read through my feedback. Additionally, in the discussion board posts, as I'm reading through, I'm noticing a lot of people are not answering all of the parts to the discussion board. So do make sure that before you're submitting, that you're reading through and answering each part. Okay, so that includes, referencing the lab simulations, bringing back your own community in the discussion board. So, those personal aspects to prove that you're, doing the assignments, you're completing the research. All of that needs to be included in your posts. Okay. So let's look ahead into this week. So this week we're going to look at the theme of air and climate change. So air quality is definitely a big part of environmental science. Just for me, I grew up in Southern California, and when I was a kid, I remember smog alerts. we had smog alerts broadcasted, and basically that just meant that the air quality was so poor that we were not supposed to engage in physical activity outside during those smog alert days. Luckily, California did a lot to improve their air quality. They have one of the strictest air quality standards, especially when it comes to car emissions. And so, they've really cleaned up the air throughout the years. Their geography in particular makes it a little bit more difficult to clean up the air completely. But, it's improved quite a bit. So this week we're going to tackle that issue. And again, some of the air quality issues in your area, you want to think about, what is contributing to your air quality. Is it something that is naturally occurring? So for example, here in where I live now in the Portland metro area in Oregon, our air quality, a lot of it has to do with environmental causes. So when we have forest fires, that can cause, huge issues with our air quality, but that's a natural cause. That's not really a human-made cause. But in your area, it might be more of a human-made cause. So think about that. Okay, so we're going to be tackling that. And then, how are we contributing to climate change? So let's look at our objectives for this week. So by the end of the week, you will be able to compare the impact of social and political reactions to air quality issues. And by doing so, just understanding the social and political reactions to air quality, this should help you finish the environmental portion of your environmental issues paper. So in Module 1, we only covered 3 parts of the environmental impact of your paper. We didn't cover the social and political reactions. So those you'll need to do on your own. So you'll get a chance to kind of see what those are in relation to air quality, but then you can apply that information or how we go about that information to your own environmental issues project that's due at the end of week 7. You'll also be able to interpret information about an environmental issue in credible environmental research. So that includes peer-reviewed articles. So we'll look at those this week. So as far as our assignments, you're going to read the assigned chapter and review the other module resources to compose your initial discussion board post. You'll also complete another worksheet assignment, and then you'll respond to your peers in a discussion topic. So pretty much, the same as we did last week. So you'll have an initial post due Thursday midnight, and then you'll respond to 2 peers for your discussion board post due Sunday midnight, and a worksheet assignment due Sunday midnight. So last week we focused in on clean water. So we learned about the Clean Water Act and how that has impacted our waterways significantly in cleaning up our water systems here in the United States. So now we're turning our attention to air quality issues and the enactment of the Clean Air Act. And so this Clean Air Act, which again was enacted very closely around the same period of time as the Clean Water Act, helped clean up our air quality, which was very, very polluted back in the 1970s, 1980s, and is getting cleaner and cleaner. But there's still a lot of room for improvement. And so we're going to learn about the history of the Clean Air Act and the different policies that have been enacted and set up by the EPA, and as well as how do we actually measure the air contaminants in our local area. Okay, so we'll study that this week. We'll also look at societal and political pressures and see if there is an unequal footing in regard to the quality of life and in regard to that. So what society wants versus policies and political pressures. We can talk about worldwide protocols. So for example, like the United Nations led Kyoto Protocol and our recent on again, off again relationship with the Paris Accords. So, we were in the Paris Accords under the Biden administration, and then we immediately got withdrawn from the Paris Accords when the Trump administration came into power this year. So, what are the consequences of that, and our struggle over limiting the impacts of climate change. Okay, so we'll talk about that this week. So for our reading this week, we'll dive into chapter 13. So chapter 13 talks about the what is a pollutant and the impact this has on the environment and human health. And so as you're reading the chapter, there's 2 questions for you to answer. So how do you contribute to air pollution on a daily basis, and how does your local community contribute? And then also, what measures do you think would be most effective in your life and your local community to decrease your contribution to air pollution and climate change? We also have a couple of websites we'd like you to visit, so this will help you, especially with the discussion posts. So we have the EPA outdoor air quality data and Air Now. So these two will help you again with your discussion board posts. And then we have a couple of videos for you to watch. And notice, they're only about 10 minutes long, so easy to digest. So the first one talks about how, how our air pollution, something that, we take for granted, breathing air every single day. Some areas of the world, people don't have access to air that is breathable. Like people do die from breathing air every single year. And so you'll watch a video that kind of shows the impact of poor air quality. And then air pollution, so what some of the science behind it. So what is an air pollutant, and what are the policies regarding it? Okay. And then we do have some additional support. So if you're having trouble with writing, if you keep getting in your feedback saying you need to include in-text citations and things like that, here's some help for you. So do utilize that academic support. Okay. And then again, just like last week, we have 2 assignments this week. So you have your discussion board post, and you have a worksheet. So the discussion board post, you have an initial post that is due by Thursday midnight. And again, just like I stated earlier, make sure you're rereading the prompt and that you've included every answer here. Okay, so you've identified everything here. I've noticed a lot of people are skipping things, and so you get marked down if you're skipping things. Okay, also make sure you're using in-text citations and including full references. All right, so that will be your initial discussion board post, and I'll post a video on specifically what you should include and how to go about it in another video. Okay, you have your 2 response posts. So notice you have differences in your response posts. So one of your response posts will be answering this part. Another response post will be about answering this part. So you have 2 separate response posts with different response prompts. So just be aware this is a little different from last time. Okay, so those 2 response posts are due by Sunday midnight. And then your journal article. Okay, so you're going to review a peer-reviewed journal article. So I will have, again, a separate video that walks you through how to complete this assignment. So take a look at that journal article video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, have a great week.